Are there really 10 top keto foods that make keto easy? Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Westman. Welcome back to my channel where I review and debunk nutritional misinformation online. In this video, we're going to go through some foods and see how they're categorized or evaluated according to Dr. Dan Maggs, who's a physician and influencer. And be sure to wait till the end till you hear my final thoughts.
Most foods contain some carbs. Knowing which contain the least will help make your low-carb journey very easy. In this video, you will learn the 10 lowest carb foods which will help to keep you full and satisfied rather than feeling starving. It can be a bit of a learning curve to understand what foods to eat on a low carbohydrate diet, particularly if you are aiming for ketosis when you need to keep the carbs really low.
Well, so I like the approach so far, and I think he's done a good job of putting the information out, having a website called Carb Dodging, dodge those carbs. And if you want ketosis, you have to keep the carbs really low. Yeah, and we typically say 20 to 30 total grams per day. And let's just keep going. I want to thank our friends at Element for sponsoring today's video. Element has a great mixture of sodium, potassium, and magnesium, everything you need on a keto diet. But specifically, this raw, unflavored version, which is labeled with a blue, teal-colored banner. This teal-colored, raw, unflavored version does not contain stevia, sugar, or any additives except a science-backed mix of 3 electrolytes our bodies need in quantities that have been already measured out for you. This is great for a keto diet, but most important thing is that it tastes great. As you know, electrolytes are really important, especially if you're following a keto or a carnivore diet. Element is offering you a free sample pack with any order. That's 8 single serving packages, free with any order. That's a great way to try it out and to share Element with a friend. Get yours at drinklmnt.com/Eric Westman. This offer is only available at my link, drinklmnt.com/Eric Westman. You'll find that in the description below. Thank you, Element, for sponsoring this video.
The ketogenic diet suggests your daily carb intake should be no more than 20 or 30 grams of net carbs per day.
Okay, let's stop there. So it's been very interesting to see how keto and low carb has played out, sometimes like a game. Remember the old telephone game where you would whisper something in someone's ear and by the time it gets around the room it comes out like something totally different? Well, when I teach a low carb or keto diet, I use total carbs, not net carbs. And what's fascinating is that net carbs can work. So here we're learning a net carb level of carbs, but I just wanted to let you know that I use total carbs because with net carbs you subtract out the fiber and the sugar alcohols under the assumption that they don't impact the blood sugar or the metabolic state of ketosis or induce more cravings for sugar. So net carbs to me is like the over-the-counter version of a keto diet. And when someone comes to me in a clinic reversing diabetes, they want to lose hundreds of pounds, if, for instance, use total carbs. It's more like the prescription strength of a drug or of a diet. And what you do with total carbs is you don't subtract the fiber and the sugar alcohols under the assumption that they affect the metabolism less than any other food or other carbs. So I know this is a point of, well, but I learned through the products that are out there now, and pretty much all the products use net carbs. That's the front of the label. What you want to do is look around to the back or the side or wherever it is and look for nutrition facts, total carbohydrates, and look at the grams of carbohydrates. So G means grams on these labels. And that's the gram I would want you to count if you're doing a prescription strength keto diet. It's not that net carbs can't work, it's just the total grams and prescription strength is stronger.
This equates to approximately 5% of your caloric intake from carbs, so very low. So let's have a look at the foods with the lowest amount of carbs. All the foods in this video have less than 1 gram of carbs per 100 grams, and if you base your meals around these, then you can't go far wrong.
Well, so now another interesting thing that I've seen with internet keto, is what we call it, the use of many different forms and approaches, which I'm grateful for. You know, there has to be different kinds of approaches. But one thing that's happened is people coming to it relatively new think all that you have to be mindful is the grams of carbohydrates. And so I see people eating a lot of cheese, for example, because it basically has very little carbohydrate, but it does have a lot of calories. Or I see people drinking lots of alcohol because there are no carbohydrates, but the alcohol has calories in it. So the method that I learned and teach actually has a restriction on foods that are high in calories as well. So it's not just the carbs, but here, of course, one of the first things to evaluate with any food or product is the grams of carbs. Total carbs is prescription strength, net grams being over-the-counter strength.
Number 1 is meat. Meat contains 0 carbs. You can choose any type to suit your own preference. Beef, lamb, chicken, turkey, pork, duck. And if you choose fattier cuts of meat, that's going to help you with your macros as well. Fat will help to keep you full and satisfied. And because of the low fat advice that we've all been given over the last 40 years, you'll often find that the fattier cuts of meat are cheaper than their leaner counterparts. So it's a win-win. Avoid highly processed flavored meats, as these can often have added sugars or additives.
So I'm going to relax that a little bit. If it's a carblet, meaning it's a very small amount of carbs, then these other processed meats, in my opinion, are okay. So don't sweat the small stuff is a saying we have. You know, a carblet, meaning it's a microgram of carbs, really doesn't impact the metabolism much. So to me, processed meats like bologna or pepperoni, these are very popular to have, and I think they're fine.
Number 2 is seafood. Again, this fabulous protein source will keep your carbs at 0. Take your pick from salmon, tuna, mackerel, sardines, and other oily fish types that are rich in omega-3. Cod, plaice, halibut, other whitefish sources, depending on where you are in the world, are also excellent. Prawns, crab, just about any other seafood you have available. Just be careful to avoid processed products such as crab or seafood sticks, and obviously breaded versions of these products. And a note that scallops and mussels are slightly higher in their carb content at 2 to 3 grams of carb per 100 grams. So just be a little bit mindful of portion sizes when you're eating those.
Yeah, that's great. So seafood has very little or no carbs at all, and you can dip the crab meat or lobster meat in butter, which is fabulous. That's the surf and turf so far, the meat and the seafood. And that's one great reason to do a low carb or keto diet and why it can be sustainable. You get such great foods. Now, if you have a history of gout, you might want to be careful with the seafood, especially oysters. And in North Carolina and other parts of the world, there are these oyster bars, and there's a habit of eating lots and lots of oysters. But because these foods have purines, which can be metabolized into uric acid and cause a gout flare, you want to be careful with the amount of those. They do have a little higher carb content as well, as he said. So these are just other considerations other than just the number of grams of carbs when you look at a food.
Number 3 is organ meats or offal. These can be enjoyed on their own or added to other meat-based dishes. They're very nutrient-dense food, which will keep the carbs at less than 1 grams, with the exception of liver, which, due to some stored glycogen within it, may provide up to 2 grams per 100 grams of carbohydrates. But 100 grams of liver is still quite a lot of this stuff, so you're probably absolutely fine.
In some areas, liver is commonly consumed. In other areas, some of my patients don't like liver at all. And so they buy these liver freeze-dried kinds of things. I find liver more palatable in a product that has it flavored, like pate or some other liver paste sort of thing. But liver, the amount of carbs in liver is, I think, pretty negligible. But again, we have the meat, the seafood, liver. These are great sources. I like this so far.
Number 4 is eggs. Eggs on their own are 0 carbs and can be eaten freely. They are a powerhouse of nutrition. However, some people argue that there is 1 gram of carbs per large egg, but given the balance of fat and protein, this is not a concern even if it is true. Just be careful if you start to add in other ingredients when you're cooking, such as milk for scrambled eggs, which will up the carb content a little bit.
And eggs, I think, are probably the perfect food. Eggs are fine, and don't worry about the cholesterol. In fact, the good cholesterol goes up the more eggs you eat and the more saturated fat in your food. Yeah, the good cholesterol goes up the more eggs you eat and the more the saturated fat is in your diet. So don't worry about that old cholesterol worry about you only have 2 or 4 eggs per week. That's an old thing that was actually never true, to limit the eggs for fear of heart disease. But the other thing about eggs I found is that the number of eggs can matter. And it's interesting to see, I've seen thousands of people in the clinic for breakfast. They'll have 2 eggs, 2 strips of bacon, 2 eggs, 2 strips of bacon, 2 eggs, 2 sausages, something like that. Occasionally I'll have someone come in with 5 eggs for breakfast with sausages, and I'll ask, well, how did you get up to 5 eggs? That's kind of out of the range I typically see. So if someone is at a stall, it's not working to your satisfaction, consider the amount of eggs or the amount of food of any of these that you're eating, and make sure you stop when you feel comfortably full. And remember, it's not a competition to eat, see how much you can eat to get away with. And what you want to do is to lose weight, is to eat less comfortably, without hunger. But I like the eggs on this list.
Number 5 is fats. Now, the most keto-friendly fats are the unprocessed sorts and can be used for cooking, drizzling over salads and stuff, or for added flavour. And there are no carbs in any of these. Choose from olive oil, extra virgin where possible, coconut oil, ghee, avocado, butter, and you're good to go.
So one might think, watching this video, that the amount of these is unlimited. I know he's not claiming that you can have unlimited amounts of these things, but if you were only counting carbs, you could have just sticks of butter if there are no carbs in it. So in a practical reality program, we do have limitations on some of these foods. So if you're not watching the amount of butter and all these oils and you're not getting the results you want, remember, you want to, if you're losing weight, you want to burn the fat that's on your body, not the fat that's on your plate and that you're eating.
Number 6 is dairy. Now, to be 0 carbs or less than 1 gram of carbs, dairy needs to have no lactose in it. And it's the lactose content that increase the carbs, such as in milk. Now, I've heard this in the comments a lot before. Can't I just make my latte out of lactose-free milk? And lactose-free products, they're great for those who are lactose intolerant, but aren't necessarily carb-free, because lactose-free products just means that the lactose, which is a sugar, has been broken down into more simple sugars. And if you've ever tried lactose-free milk, you'll notice that it's actually sweeter than normal milk. Cheese is a great source of fat and also a great source of protein. Most cheese has 0 carbs, with the exception of cottage and cream cheese, which has about 4 grams per 100 grams. Feta cheese, ricotta cheese, and goat's cheese aren't quite 0 carb. They have about 2 grams per 100 grams. And processed cheeses, such as your squirty cheeses, those cheese slices you get, have between 4 and 6 grams per 100 grams. Obviously, if you're going to go for cheeses with those kind of dried fruits added in, you can go way up, 12 grams of carbs per 100 grams or more. But cheese can generally be eaten fairly freely, and there are loads that are pretty much carb-free. Halloumi, brie, Yes, Parmesan, Gruyere, mozzarella, cheddar, and Stilton. Stilton's another favorite of mine. So many great options to choose from.
Yeah, the cheese makes a low-carb keto carnivore, if you tolerate cheese, diets to be very palatable and sustainable. So, but if you're trying to lose weight, be careful. If you're trying to reverse type 2 diabetes, you have a medical illness you're trying to fix, be careful of the amount of cheese. And in our program that we teach, there's roughly a 4 ounces limitation, but that can vary based on the person. And if you're snacking on cheese all day long, thinking that it has no carbs or very little, and you're not getting the results you want, consider watching the amount of cheese. And let me know down below if that was an issue for you.
Number 7 is vegetables. Now, depending on where you choose to get your references from, the carb quantities in vegetables varies quite significantly. And I guess this isn't surprising, as these are natural products with many different varieties. Growing conditions around the world naturally will lead to different carb counts.
That's a really good point. And even, let's step back, if you're using an app or some sort of monitoring tool, how could it be perfectly set to know how many carbs are in 100 grams or a cup of that vegetable? So you want to be very careful with counting with macros and to think that you're getting more precision than you're actually getting. One person came to me, for example, saying, I'm getting 21.5 grams of carbs per day. And, first, of course, total or net, because some of these macro counters and apps can be set to net carbs. I always use total. But still, the idea that you get that level of precision, the 21.5 per day, it's an illusion. We really can't be that certain.
Number 8 is fruit. Sadly, there are no fruits that are considered truly zero carb. Avocado, despite the high fiber content, will still provide you about 2 grams per 100 grams. Another option would be olives. If you only eat 5 of them, then you will stay under 1 gram of carbohydrates. So yeah, you can absolutely have this on a ketogenic diet. You can have small amounts in a nice big salad, but just remember, too much will push up your carb intake.
Yeah, very good point. But if you are counting total grams and you figure out that a quarter cup of berries is 5 grams, and you're able to moderate to that quarter cup of berries, and having berries, a quarter cup, on the Greek yogurt is one way to have some berries in it, or fruit in a small amount. If you remember back to the diets in the 1970s, there was a grapefruit diet. And of all the fruits, of course, the grapefruit is the least sweet, or maybe certain berries aren't very sweet. And so grapefruits were part of, remember there was a half a grapefruit in the morning. Of course, no sugar on it, but a grapefruit is the lowest of all of the sweet fruits. Of course, the joke here is avocado is a fruit, so you can get fruit and avocado and olives, but most people don't think of those as fruits because they're not sweet.
Number 9 is nuts and seeds. Much like what I mentioned with vegetables, there are a lot of variations in the quoted carb contents of nuts and seeds, but you do need to be a little bit mindful about your choices. Almonds, Brazil nuts, and walnuts are very close to being zero carb and also have very high fiber contents, as do hazelnuts, macadamia nuts, and sesame seeds. Just watch out for, and I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but cashew nuts, pistachio nuts, and peanuts are all surprisingly high in carbohydrates, and despite tasting absolutely lovely, do catch a lot of people out when they're getting started. Number 10.
Yeah, so nuts and seeds are such a kind of Pandora's box that when people start out on my program, I say no nuts or seeds, just because it's hard for people to stop them or moderate them. I was able to go around the US some years ago, and we had mornings where people would come out to our ADAPT events. Please let me know if you recall an ADAPT event in the comments below. And I would ask people, how many of you had trouble with nuts? And there would be hands, 50% of people would have trouble controlling the nuts. So in the program that I teach, because I want it to work the first time, every time, I use the total gram method, which means you don't subtract out the fiber and the sugar alcohols. I limit the cheese, the cream, the oils, the mayonnaise, and I say no nuts at first, if you want it to work the first time, every time. I do recall recently someone came in and said, I am having nuts, feeling like she's violating some rule. And I said, no, if you can have a little bit of nuts and it works, that's fine. I'm not against nuts other than they will stall or prevent it from working for up to 50% of people. And I don't want to teach something that doesn't work for 50% of people. It's just not my style. I want it to work for everyone the first time.
Number 10 is condiments. You might be surprised that yes, there are still some condiments that you can enjoy with your meals. Not the obviously sugar-laden ketchups and sauces, but you can use things like mustard, obviously not the honey version, mayonnaise, but preferably a homemade one or those made without seed oils, hollandaise sauce if you fancy getting in the kitchen. Béarnaise sauce is one of my favorite of the classical French sauces, absolutely amazing with steak, but is a little bit tricky to cook if I'm honest. Vinegars, lots of people take apple cider vinegar to help with blood sugar control, and yes, vinegars have a positive effect on your insulin sensitivity. So in some respects can be considered a bit of a low-carb superfood. And of course you can make vinaigrettes with a bit of olive oil, absolutely fantastic on a salad. But I should warn you about balsamic vinegar, which has 2 grams of carbs per tablespoon. And I was told once that the dark color actually comes from molasses, and this is why it has the higher carb count. But I only found this out after I'd been eating balsamic vinegar dressing on my salad back in 2016 when I started my own low-carb journey. And it didn't stop me losing nearly 70 pounds in just over 6 months.
So condiments, right, there's some, rules and, if it's just a little bit of ketchup, it's not going to be a problem. So some people will look at the list I have on the wall of the foods that are on my program initially, and they'll say, oh, no ketchup. And I'll say, well, it depends. Now, yes, you can go out and buy the low-carb ketchup, or you can have ketchup on the fast food burger, just take the bun off and eat that. You don't have to scrape it off. It's only 1 or 2 grams, depending how much ketchup is there. Total carbs we're counting, not net. So there are ways around this absolutes here of no ketchup, but mustard is generally lower in carbs unless it's a sweet mustard. But the idea that you can't have ketchup, especially if you're out and about, that's not quite right. Although that's what I teach at first as well. So you can see that there's an initial teaching and then a lower or layer of teaching of fundamentals of how many grams of carbs are in there. And this video has done a great job of talking about how many carbs are in the foods. I really like this video, and remember it's teaching the over-the-counter version based on net carbs, not the prescription strength version using total carbs that I teach. And then it doesn't have the limitations of, although he makes mention of the amount of food at the end, we have specific limitations to the cream, cheese, mayonnaise, things like that, or the program that we teach, just to give a little more guidance to people about how much to limit at first. Then of course, while nuts are super low in carbs, we would say don't have nuts at first. And then one final thought is I can't tell you the best carbs. And then one final thought is I can't tell you what foods are the best for you. The best foods are the ones you love, the ones you like, the ones that make it sustainable. So even though you may see all of these zero-carb foods, if you don't like them, find some other ones. In the method that I use, I have a list of foods and I ask people to choose the ones that they like. So that would be the last comment on there. But I really like this video for the information that it gives. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell, and look for new content on Wednesdays and Fridays. If If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and check out adaptyourlifeacademy.com.